This is the
Five Stars
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
Well, that was a jam-packed weekend of wrestling variety. And interestingly enough, two of those shows had groundbreaking news bulletins. Unfortunately, they were not good news bulletins. But before we get to all that, welcome to the FSWR podcast. Here each Monday and Friday on YouTube and Rumble for new content and wrestling talk. If you are new to the show, make sure to subscribe, like the show, and leave a comment to share your feedback on the material we talk about today. There's plenty of it to discuss. It is the Monday installment of the podcast, so that means we've got AEW Rampage and NWA Powerrr to talk about. And we also have WWE's Hell in a Cell Premium Live event to discuss. I can't believe I'm calling it that, but well, that's what we've come to. And we're going to cover that at the very end. And suffice it to say, it was a very noteworthy show. Mostly for one match, but still very noteworthy. For now, though, let's get into Rampage and Powerrr and knock those out of the way before we get to the real main event of the show. All right, Rampage. Well, there was at least something to talk about on this one. Not really something I want to talk about, but we're going to have to. Apparently, Tony Khan is listening to my other requests when it comes to what he needs to do with certain talent. Adam Cole was on color for the opener. Great. Perfect. That's the best role for him right now. That way I don't have to actually see him on camera and I can visualize the appearance of what Adam Cole used to look like in NXT when he had a tan and hit the gym more than twice a month. So the opener was the Beta Bucks versus the Lucha Fucks, and I will maintain every statement that I've ever said about a Bucks match. If you go in with your brain turned off and you understand that there's not going to be a shred of psychology or coherency to anything they do, then I'm sure it was a great match. You also have to actually like this form of no-sell 1950s acrobatic stunt performance wrestling, which, well, I don't. I think it sucks. I think I'm also waiting for the next time Rey Fenix breaks his arm again doing all this shitty high-risk offense. I don't know, I mean, you'd think maybe the guy would have learned something after the initial injury. I would like for someone to rationally try and explain to me the psychology of the spot where a guy is able to legitimately poison Rana, his own partner, while sitting on his shoulders. It's not the first time I've seen it, but you know, it's funny. It seems like the only place I do see it is in AEW. Go figure. Now, that was not the only stupid stuff we saw in this match. There was plenty of it. I may be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure they kind of killed the gimmick of the Meltzer driver in this match. Because Penta missed his cue to break up the fall, which meant that Phoenix had to kick out. And I don't think I've ever seen anybody kick out of the Meltzer driver before. Now, why did Phoenix have to kick out because Penta missed his cue? Well, because they had more shit to get in, you know? So, yeah, they ripped off Penta's mask at the end. They hit something on Phoenix and pinned him and whatever. I watched it. It happened. I've seen worse matches with these teams, In fact, I've seen worse matches with them against each other. I will never forget my tangent of that cage match that I saw in that pay-per-view where I just went completely off the rails. And again, it's important to remember here, for all of you that are still drinking the Kool-Aid on Tony Khan's booking genius, the Beta Bucks are potentially being rewarded with a tag title shot after they just did a clean job to two out-of-shape, well past their prime Hardy Boys on pay-per-view. One of whom is currently on the shelf right now because his body is so beat up, he was pulled from a TV match this past Wednesday after they already announced the match. So there's that. Powerhouse Hobbs and Ricky Starks had a very short squash that mostly happened during the inset promo. I mean, it was fine. Hobbs and Starks should already be the tag champions, and I already talked about that with the Double or Nothing review, but, well, you see, Tony Khan's an idiot and has no idea what he's doing, so of course he was going to keep the belts on the 37th best tag team in the company. And then we had Athena in her debut match against Kiera Hogan. And of course, because this is her debut, and this might be the first time that a lot of people are actually seeing Athena wrestle, well, A, it goes through a commercial break, and B, it goes way too long, and she ends up selling for a good bit of it. Both of which are completely ineffective booking strategies to getting over new talent, but that would also imply that they're actually trying to get over their new talent. And beyond that, the match was really not all that good. You know, Athena's another one of those WWE crossovers that, honestly, I just never got the hype of. Her finisher I always thought was kind of neat. And I know she went by Ember Moon in NXT or whatever, but truthfully, I spent most of the time watching her down there wondering what the hell her gimmick was supposed to be. Nothing against her. I'm sure she's a nice person. Again, I watched her interview with Chris Van Vliet where she did the WWE roasting session and talked about all the mismanagement and bad booking she underwent there. I would like to believe that she'll be better off in AEW, but history shows me that in a couple months, she'll be no better off than girls like Toni Storm or Ruby Riott are right now. And if I'm proven wrong, I will happily rescind my statement about that. But until then, I'm going by the track record, man. I don't know how good a program with her and Jade Cargill is going to be, but based on the showing Athena had with Kiera here, my hopes are not that high. But then, the show got great. And when I say great, I mean heartbreaking, but it was still the best thing I've seen on the show since probably the first time we saw him on the show. We had a physical CM Punk appearance. Hot damn. It's about time. Some actual fucking star power on this show. And he's got a big announcement. He's hurt. Fuck. God damn it. But is he really hurt? Well, I'll say this. You cannot fake cry the way CM Punk did when he first walked out to the ring. When that dude walked into the ring, you could tell he was legitimately devastated to have to break this news to everyone. And this is probably the best CM Punk promo I've heard probably since his return promo last year. He covered a lot of ground. Said the last thing he ever wanted to do was let the fans down, and that he vowed when he came back that he was going to push himself until the wheels came off. And it is strange because he never specified what was broken that was going to require surgery. I guess from his perspective, it's not important because based on what he said here, it sounded like they're not going to directly strip Punk of the title. Moreover, I guess they're going to do another one of those interim champion deals because, well, you know, well, it worked so well the first time when they did it with the TNT title. And now we've got Sammy still carrying around the old version of the belt, and it's impossible to keep track of who has what belt. But here's what I'm trying to still figure out with all this. Was he hurt during the world title match with Hangman Page from the pay-per-view? Or did it happen in that six-man tag from Dynamite? Because if I had to venture a guess, I would probably have assumed it was the pay-per-view match that he got hurt, and then the Dynamite match may have exacerbated things. Because that Dynamite match he had with FTR was probably one of the weakest showings I've seen from Punk since he debuted with the company. Like, he's really sloppy in that match. Remember, he tried for that springboard elbow and completely ate shit. And he was already moving around pretty slowly to begin with, but I don't know, I guess instinctually, because Punk is so good, I figured he was just selling from the pay-per-view. Guess it turned out he was really hurt. So, yeah, Punk's going to be gone for a while. How long, I have no idea, because he didn't really cover any details about the injury he sustained and, what the time frame is going to be for his return. But here's what we have established within the last 2 days. MJF apparently won't be seen on the show for a period of time. CM Punk, injured, so he's going to be out for a while. So the two best things on this entire show in the last year are both going to be out for a period of time during the same week, which probably means that my enjoyment of this product is going to be heavily dependent on 2, maybe 3 things depending on how they book him. Bryan Danielson having good singles matches whenever they decide to remove him from his association with the Blackpool nonsense. FTR having good tag matches whenever Tony decides to actually book them properly. And Wardlow, if they even have a game plan for him now aside from squash matches. God. And it's an unfortunate situation and horrible timing, but all you can really do is hope for a speedy recovery for Punk, because the thought of this show being carried by anyone other than Punk or MJF at this point in time is almost impossible to imagine. And then we have the main event. It's the Battle of the Blank Slate Personalities. Scorpio Sky versus Dante Martin for the TNT title. And I would like to say that I had any general interest in what was going on here, but I really can't, because the announcer spent about 80% of the match talking about more important matter. Excalibur did the shittiest, most ineffective job of explaining what they're going to be doing with crowning an interim AEW World Champion with Punk being out. I believe their overly convoluted method to getting there is that they're going to have an over-the-top battle royal on Dynamite, with the winner facing the new #1 contender Jon Moxley, and the winner of that goes to the Forbidden Door show to wrestle for a chance to be the interim champion. Okay, a couple questions. One, why is Jon Moxley the #1 contender? Correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't he just on the losing team from a garbage street fight less than 7 days ago? 2, what? I'm not kidding you. I had to go back and rewind this like 3 or 4 times just to get a clear picture with this, because when they first announced it, I felt like I was watching Impact back in the day. Probably like when they were announcing the reverse battle royal concept and trying to make sense out of the whole thing with all the graphics on the screen. The only thing that was missing from the whole thing was Mike Tenay going, "It's really quite simple." But I think I understand what they're doing, and my expectations are not that high, to say the least. Unless they've got something real clever planned out for that Battle Royal on Wednesday. And they have MJF show up, win the match, beat Moxley in the main event, and win in the finals of the Forbidden Door pay-per-view to become the interim heel champion until Punk makes his return. And then we get the big blow-off with Punk and MJF, which they kind of teased more over that work-shoot promo from Dynamite where they had Punk chase MJF off camera. Now, of course, we all know that it's not going to happen because Tony doesn't think that skillfully. The other good option to go with is probably to have Danielson win the Battle Royal, wrestle his buddy Mox in the main event, beat him because Moxley fucking sucks and should never sniff the ass crack of the world title ever again, and then it's Danielson who wins at the pay-per-view to be the interim champion so they can do Danielson and Punk when he comes back. That would also work. Oh yeah, there was also a title match going on here. Scorpio won with the TKO. Who cares? Most of the show was completely inferior to all the CM Punk news, and it's not necessarily the kind of news you want to hear when it's been pretty much the only beacon of hope this company has at actually being successful. For my money, it's going to be very interesting to see whether or not things dovetail in the ratings with Punk being absent from the television. And again, if MJF's going to be written off too, that is 2 of their highest rated draws. They're going to be drastically affected in the short term. So now is the time where Tony has to be a strong businessman. Does he take the potential hit in viewership and stick the course with whatever story he's trying to come up with? Or does he panic and fall victim to the hotshot booking mentality? That, I think, is going to be the real testament to Tony Khan as a booker. He's kind of backed into a corner right now with one unfortunate incident that was completely out of his control and another incident that he has complete control over. So we'll see what happens, but God almighty. If you thought I was down on AEW before, dude, these next couple of months are going to be brutal. I already gave up on AEW once during that whole pandemic era, which was just awful for a wide range of reasons. I'm hoping it doesn't come to that again. So anyway, let's move on to NWA Powerrr. This would be Season 8, Episode 10. And our program begins with Austin Aries' long-lost clone, Colby Corino, in the ring for a promo. And this was all about hyping the main event with him and Homicide for the junior heavyweight title. But I like the way they did this. They had Colby talk about the history with Homicide and his father, Steve Corino. And of course, we're going way back in the time machine when talking about that Corino-Homicide feud. I had seen them in Ring of Honor back in... God, it had to have been the early 2000s. And if I'm right, I think that was the match where Homicide gave Corino that infamous slap that pretty much deafened him in one ear. Now, of course, with Tony Khan owning the rights to the ROH library, it was going to be virtually impossible for the NWA to actually get their hands on any of that footage to show us the history with the two. Although it would have added a nice little touch to the main event. But like I said, they set this up really well from the beginning. Colby was out there talking about the family history, said he wants to live up to his family name by capturing his first major championship, and if he can do that at the expense of Homicide, it would be that much sweeter. And I put Colby over plenty of times when we watch these NWA Powerrr shows. I know he wasn't born with the best genetics in terms of size or strength, but that guy's a real solid talent. If he ever wanted to broaden the scope of his career and branch out beyond the NWA banner, I could see him as someone AEW would want to pick up in the next few years. I have absolutely no faith that they'd book him well, but hey, he'd be making more money out of it. And that brought us to our first match, which actually kind of felt like something straight out of an old Mid-South taping. It's Eric Jackson versus Matt Vine. 2 newcomers that we've never seen before, but basically getting thrown out there to do a cold match. And I thought that was kind of cool. Back in the day, they'd have probably done something like this toward the end of the show and probably have billed it as like a standby match after all the main card matches that Grizzly Smith and Bill Watts would come up with for the weekly programming. But I think this format totally works with the NWA environment. And they try to give these guys a little something extra, give them some color. Jackson apparently goes by The Distraction, which probably wouldn't have been the first nickname I'd have come up with. Like, really? The Distraction? I mean, it's not as bad as Jericho going by The Wizard, but it's not a winner either. Vine also had a nickname. His moniker is The Instant Classic. Didn't Christian Cage trademark that back in like the mid-2000s? Ugh. Hope he doesn't catch wind that someone else is stealing one of his old gimmicks. But looking past the joking with the guys' gimmicks, it wasn't a bad match. For two green guys that don't have much experience, I thought they did all right. Matt Vine's got a decent look and size, and he works the brash, cocky heel roll decently. I'd imagine they'll probably be sticking around for future tapings, so, wherever they found them, I'd hold on to them. They're certainly better than most of the outlaw goofballs that are cluttering up the indie scene right now. Vine ended up going over, which kind of seemed like the right choice. Martin definitely needs a little more work on his punches to make them look more convincing, because they didn't look too good here. I did like how Vine's finishing super kick is legitimately called the Instant Classic. Wonder where he got that name from. After that, there was a promo with the Ill-Begotten that I kind of glossed over. The Danny Deals thing... Yeah, sorry, not digging it. Yeah, I've had very minimal exposure to most of the stuff he's done, but a lot of it's involved a lot of the bottom rung ladder guys on the show that I really don't have a vested interest in seeing, and managing the Ill-Forgotten is not doing him any favors, so yeah, this promo didn't really do anything for me. It was at this point where they re-aired the video package with Nick Aldis and Matt Cardona, and I almost skipped through it, because I had already seen this exact promo package like 2 weeks ago. But I did catch the very end, because they showed us a graphic on the screen where Joe Galli was talking about a sustained injury that Cardona suffered at, lo and behold, we were just talking about all the garbage outlaw play wrestlers a minute ago. Apparently Cardona sustained a severe arm injury at a GCW show this past weekend. And this has potentially jeopardized the upcoming NWA main event between Aldis and Cardona for the world title. But they told us that he would be providing medical updates once they get further clarification on the severity of the injury. He is supposedly going to be at the show, though. So, it's weird. It's like, part of me is wondering if it's part of a work. Although, according to Cage Side Seats in the article I read, Cardona had claimed it was a torn bicep, which, that's the case, it fucking blows. Because a bicep tear, that's a pretty bad injury to have, especially if it's going to require surgery. I think the usual timestamp for recovery is like 4 to 5 months, sometimes even longer, depending on the seriousness. So if he's going to be out for a while, they're going to need to come up with a game plan in case they need to vacate the title and hold it up. I talked about how I was never really sold on Cardona as the world champion to begin with, mostly because I had my problems with the work he did outside the company and all those dumbass outlaw promotions. But I've been on record saying he's been a solid heel world champion for them, despite my issues with the stuff he's done outside the NWA. So, hopefully he recovers soon. Camille did a promo sporting a beautiful Bobby Eaton t-shirt. So she's automatically my favorite wrestler of all time. And she was mostly there to plug her upcoming title match with whatever the girl's name is. I totally forgot to write it down. Whatever, it's not like she's winning the belt anyway. Then we had Red Titus versus TomLatimer, which is a pretty fun little match. It is kind of weird how Latimer has essentially turned babyface off camera when it seemed like I was watching him in a blood feud with Nick Aldis not that long ago, where he was pile driving him on chairs and trying to end his career. But these guys had solid chemistry together here. They did an angle where Latimer hit Titus with a running elbow, and he immediately started selling it like he dislocated it. So they had Rhett work him over for a while there. And Latimer ended up making a fine little one-arm comeback. Ended up hitting a one-handed pop-up powerbomb, which was kind of cool. Even more impressive than that, though, there was a spot during the heat where Rhett had him on the mat in like a cross armbar, and Latimer did one of those deadlifts where he just rolled through, picked Titus up in from a kneeling position, and not only did he power through and slam Titus on the ground, but he actually held him up in the air and spun him around before slamming him. I mean, I knew Latimer was a strong dude, but that was impressive. But a good match nonetheless. Latimer does kind of feel overdue for a push for something bigger, because ever since that fallout to the Nick Aldis feud, the guy's kind of been toiling around and not doing much of anything. Like, if he's going to be a face now, I don't know, I think it'd be great to try and program him with Jax Dane to maybe go after the national title, because that actually might be an interesting feud. It's a lot more enticing than anything Chris Adonis ever did with it. I'll say that much. And the main event, Colby Corino and Homicide for the junior heavyweight title. And again, I already kind of covered the backstory here, so I'm not going to go into detail again. But once again, I thought both guys had a solid showing here. Homicide's a guy I've always kind of run hot and cold with. I liked his work in TNA when he was doing the LAX thing, but there have also been a handful of Homicide matches where I wasn't totally on board. I think I remember watching him do something on that GCW show I watched earlier this year with Jon Moxley, and, well, yeah, we'll just leave it there. But I enjoyed this. Excluding Medusa's commentary, which was mid at best. And by mid, I mostly mean atrocious as all get out. And I always like Medusa, but, yeah, her commentary, almost kind of makes me wish Velvet Sky was back at the booth. It was a very hard-hitting match, though. You know, I bought that these guys had some real personal tension that they were trying to dish out here. The big spot at the end saw Colby try to grab one of the steel buckle rods to use, but the ref thwarted him. Did a couple back-and-forth near falls, and Colby set Homicide up on the top rope, went for a Hurricane Rana, but Homicide rolled through and pinned him using the tights. So a little bit of the receipt finish for Colby trying to use the heel tactics to win. Thought that was a nice little touch. And they got into a little shoving match, so they planted the idea that they are not done feuding. So, once again, very solid episode of Powerrr. And a lot like last week, keeping things very simple with the layout. You know, they're not trying to cram in too much. They aren't rushing through stuff and going at a breakneck pace for the entirety of the hour, and I appreciate that. Obviously, they're building toward that Always Ready show coming up. Actually, I think next week, right? I thought Galley said June 11th, but I could be wrong. Hold on, let me check. Always Ready. Yep. It is apparently streaming on Fight TV next week, Saturday, June 11th. Now, I still have to find out if I'll be able to watch that on delay because I don't have a Fight TV subscription. So if the show's not streaming on another platform, I'll probably have to wait until I can find a service that actually airs it on delay. Which also means that I'll probably be spoiled with the finishes well in advance, but we'll see. Right now, I have no idea what's booked for that show aside from the Camille match and possibly the Nick Aldis-Matt Cardona match if Cardona's cleared to wrestle, which, judging from the announcement during the show, he probably won't be. So, stay posted for that, but for next week, I'll see what I want to do about that because normally they air those Power Surge episodes if they have a pay-per-view coming up that weekend or they're doing like a season finale deal. And the Power Surge shows are usually skippable, to say the least. And we've come to it. WWE Hell in a Cell 2022. And funny story about the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. I believe the very last Hell in a Cell event that I watched was back in 2019, where they did the infamous Seth Rollins Fiend match, which I still believe may rank among the worst pay-per-view main events I've seen in wrestling history. I think that was also around the point where I gave up trying to watch WWE, and pretty much from then until the 2021 SummerSlam show, that is when I last got back into the swing of catching up with WWE content, outside clips that I would occasionally watch or binging some old stuff on the archives. So anyway, this Hell in a Cell event was basically centered around one story, and that was the circulating news with Cody Rhodes going in with an injury. From what I gathered, The sources indicate that Cody had hurt himself weight training earlier in the afternoon, and he had torn his right pectoral muscle completely off the bone. And if y'all remember that match that Hunter had in Saudi Arabia with Taker, Kane, and Shawn several years ago, and you saw those graphic images of Hunter after the show with the swollen pec, that was basically what Cody came out looking like in the main event. And the longer that match went, the worse it got for the poor bastard. So we'll definitely cover the main event when we get there, but let me just kind of briefly touch on this while we're on the subject of Cody, because he's been one of the real wrestling hot topics of 2022. Say what you want about the guy. I know Cody's done a lot in the last few years that have made him come across like one of the most unlikable people on the planet. But for all the talk we've collectively tried to conjure up about Cody, the fact that it's obvious he doesn't really like wrestling and he's doing everything in his power to eventually transition out of that role to become a TV celebrity or a movie star, I don't know how much of that reigns true after watching him in that main event with Seth. Think about this for a minute. First of all, the guy had to get medically cleared to compete in that match. So whichever doctor cleared him before the show, either that doctor is the dumbest fucking moron on the face of the earth, or Cody had to do a lot of persuading to get management to sign off on letting him work. Secondly, there were about 40 different directions they could have taken that main event if they had to call an audible given Cody's condition. They could have cut the match length in half, do everything in their power to make sure Cody wasn't adding further damage to his torn pec, and they could have gone in and treated it as a do the best we can scenario. But instead, I'll be damned if that wasn't probably the best WWE main event I've seen on a show in God knows how long. It is by far the best match this company's done this year, and I don't even think it's close. A close second would probably be the match that they had last month at the WrestleMania Backlash show, but in comparison to other matches I've seen from this company in 2022, this surpassed every match I saw at Mania. It surpassed both Cody-Seth matches, and I mean, I know we're only in June right now, but at this stage, I don't know what's going to top it. Is it the best match I've seen in 2022, period? No, I don't think so. I still think the dog collar match with MJF and Punk was better. To a degree, I would probably argue the Bryan Danielson-Adam Page match was better than this one, although the finish to that match is still questionable to me now that we reflect on how fucking awful Adam Page was as a world champion. But this was certainly in my top 3 so far. And again, we're only halfway through the year, so it is possible that we'll see something better. But if Cody's going to be out of action for a period of time, it's going to be hard to fill his shoes in that absence. Like I've said countless times, and I will continue to reiterate this because it's very important. I know this might dissuade a lot of AEW fans. Maybe it won't. But I truly believe that Cody was always a much better fit for the WWE machine. He was never going to have the quality matches he's had with Seth in AEW, and quite frankly, that's probably not a bad thing in hindsight. The injury is absolutely devastating timing for both Cody and the company as a whole, and within the span of the last 7 days, wrestling has lost 2, potentially 3 of the best overall talents and superstars in the business today, that being Punk, potentially MJF for story purposes, and now Cody. And if all those promos Dusty used to cut about the demons that live inside of us were right, then boy are those demons making their manifestations known. So I'll talk more about the Cody-Seth match when we get to it, but I just wanted to acknowledge Cody going through with this because he didn't need to, and most people would probably have advised him not to, but it was a very important match for both guys. It was a blow-off to a grudge feud that's been building for months, And it was a very fitting ending by the time we got there, despite the fact that Cody went into it half purple. As for the rest of the show, let's just get into it. We'll analyze as we go. Opening match was Becky Lynch, Asuka, and Bianca Belair in a three-way for the Raw Women's Championship. And the first thing in my notes here before all three girls were even in the ring, boy, what a fall from grace for Asuka. You know what's funny too? I was binging some old NXT stuff about a month ago, and I was watching a lot of Asuka's matches when she first signed with the company, and she was awesome because she beat everyone and actually looked like a badass. Imagine that. All it took was one Mania loss to Charlotte to completely neuter her career on the main roster. And correct me if I'm wrong too, but wasn't she basically MIA for almost an entire year? I can't even remember the last time I saw an Asuka match on the main roster. It had to have been a couple years by now. Her strikes and kicks still look fucking great. And of course, that's not to single Asuka out above Bianca or Becky, because I'm big fans of both of theirs too, especially Bianca. I knew she was going to be a big star the moment I saw her debut in NXT. And this was really good. Probably went about 5 minutes longer than really necessary, but the girls worked hard. Nothing looked horrendously bad. Yeah, obviously, there's always going to be the overly choreographed looking stuff in these kinds of matches, but that's par for the course with WWE. There's only so many times I can echo the phrase, I hate multi-man matches, but at least if you're going to do it, you had the right three girls to do it with. Most of these kinds of matches just end up turning into big moves galore where, everyone's hitting each other with finishers, doing 10,000 near falls, and there's not a whole lot of psychology or story being told through the match. But like I said, the action was good enough here where it didn't detract from anything. Of course, they went with every lame three-way finish in the book, which I guess is part of some kind of story they've been doing with Becky and Bianca on Raw. Still doesn't make up for the fact that it's every cut and dry WWE finish to a multi-man match you've ever seen. But Bianca retained. She pinned Asuka, so I don't know what that means going forward. I guess Bianca and Becky are going to keep feuding, which, I mean, all right. I've already seen that match twice now, from what I remember. It was once at last year's SummerSlam and WrestleMania a few months ago. So I don't know if there's a whole lot of breathing room for another rematch there unless they're going to gimmick it up a little bit. Asuka being a placeholder to kind of take the fall saddens me as someone that actually used to enjoy her work in NXT. But, I have also been on record talking about how WWE needs to start looking to phase out some of the old guard with their women's division and look to start pushing girls like Rhea Ripley or Bianca Belair or Shayna Baszler into those spots. Asuka's been around for a long time now, so as much as I like her work, seeing her lose now doesn't bother me as much as it would have several years ago when they never should have beaten her until they found someone worthy of actually ending her undefeated streak and not giving it to the overrated botch fest in Charlotte fucking Flair. So then we followed that with MVP and Omos versus Bobby Lashley in what I dubbed in my notes as the feud where the only people that want to see it continue are Vince McMahon and whatever lab dogs are surrounding him at headquarters. Seriously, I cannot believe this thing is still going on. And I don't even watch Raw, so God help those poor unfortunate souls that have had to watch these segments building up to this match. I feel for you. I haven't seen MVP wrestle in years. I'm surprised he's still going. But at the end of the day, it's Omos on another pay-per-view level show. And there's only so many ways you're going to smoke and mirrors Omos before the reality sets in that the dude sucks, and he's probably not going to get any better than he is right now. Case in point, did you see that spot where he drove Lashley through the barricade and stumbled over his own feet? Seriously, the guy's a bull in a china shop out there. Lashley going over was the best decision. I think I've seen enough of these Omos Lashley matches to last me a lifetime. They're not good. And this was probably the best of the three I've seen. And they even tried to throw a 40-something-year-old MVP to add a little bit of window dressing to it. Still didn't work. So, that's all I have to say about that match. Let us hopefully never have to speak of it again. So I stepped out of the room for about 5 minutes to brush my teeth and do my nightly skincare routine. And I came back just in time for the downbeat of Kevin Owens versus Ezekiel. A gimmick that I still can't tell if it's better or worse than the Drifter. At least under that gimmick, the dude actually played guitar well and got over before they totally ruined him. I don't know about the whole clean-shaven Ultimate Warrior getup he's got going on now. In fact, the whole gimmick itself is just wacky. Like, first of all, the whole thing's ridiculous because it's not even like they're running with some kind of split personality deal. I think the idea is that we're supposed to buy that Elias and Ezekiel are two entirely different people, which, I mean, you can maybe do if one of the guys was wearing a mask or something. Make it like a JYD Stagger Lee thing from Mid-South where people could actually suspend disbelief to a degree. But the fact that it's clearly Elias without a beard or guitar, like, really? I mean, even if the fans are willing to go with it because it's WWE, it's still an incredibly stupid story. And by the way, speaking of incredibly stupid, what? This is what they're doing with Kevin Owens after that classic Mania match with Steve Austin? All right, then. Don't mind me trying to make logic and sense out of things, especially in this company. The match existed. Felt more like a top-of-the-hour Raw match, but, I mean, you can say that a lot of these premium live event matches we get with WWE. I have no idea what Owens going over accomplishes if they're trying to push a new character, but, well, I also don't know why WWE's done 90% of the crap they've done in the last decade. So I have a question about this Judgment Day group. Maybe someone can help me out a bit here. Are they really trying to rip off the Dark Order gimmick, but are actually doing it better because Edge, Damian Priest, and Rhea Ripley are actual stars? And not a bunch of outlaw goofs in masks that never win matches? If so, it's an honorable effort. I'll give them that. So the match is Edge, Priest, and Rhea versus AJ Styles, Finn Balor, and Liv Morgan. And if Owens versus Ezekiel is a top-of-the-hour Raw match, I'd say this would perfectly suffice as a main event Raw match. Keyword Raw and not a pay-per-view level show. Regardless, I liked the match. Thought it was a fun six-man. A great set of elite-level talent in there. And Liv Morgan. But that's alright, because she didn't do too much there, and that was probably for the better. They did a very bare-bones tag where the faces started off in control. The heels worked over Finn for a while. AJ got the big hot tag at the end. Everything ended up breaking down into the big schmoz. There was a great springboard forearm in this match from AJ. Sorry, I put that there as a rib at CM Punk, but then I thought back to hearing Punk's promo on Rampage, and now I feel bad. Speaking of AJ, though, he did get busted open pretty bad there toward the end. I have no idea what the hell happened. I remember he did a stereo diving elbow to the floor with Balor, and then the next time I saw him on camera, he was gushing blood from his forehead. But the finish saw Finn set up Edge for the coup de grace, but Rhea got in front of him to stop him. I legitimately thought she was going to press slam Balor off the top rope, which would have been both fantastic and believable because they're practically the same size. But instead, Liv jumped on Rhea's back. They took a tumble to the floor. Balor went for the double foot stomp, but Edge moved, hit him with a spear, and pinned him. Got to get those younglings over, you know what I mean? Edge is a future world champion, goddammit. Gonna make sure we give this young lion a big pay-per-view win here. Like I said, though, very good match. I'm still not entirely sold on the faction, but the group members are gold. It sucks that it took them until 2022 to figure out that Rhea Ripley should be booked like a star, but better late than never. Here's the thing, though, and I thought about this while I was watching the match. I think the reason I'm not buying the Judgment Day faction is the fact that it's WWE, and I know how they book. And I've been conditioned to be such a skeptic when it comes to anything this company does. I just don't have any faith that anything productive is going to come out of this faction in the long term. Like, unless they're planning on making Priest the world champion and make Rhea the top women's champion, whichever brand that would be, I guess that would be Raw. Why does this group even exist? What's the end game with everyone? Are they just going to be a cult where they recruit a bunch of guys and it becomes NWO circa 1997 where they got half the fucking roster aligned with them and no one stands out? Is it going to be a mid/upper mid-card faction that's always going to have a spot on the card, but they're never going to be slated at the top of the title picture? Just things I'm thinking about if I were a booker with WWE and I was trying to think about where I wanted to take this group. My end goal would be to make sure someone in that faction is the world champion. Even if it's Edge in the short term, and then maybe have someone like a Damian Priest turn babyface and beat him for the belt at some point. But again, it's WWE, so they'll probably just drop the whole thing in about a year and we'll never hear about it ever again. So following that, we got another piss breaker. It's Madcap Moss versus Baron Corbin in a no-holds-barred match at Hell in a Cell. And I'll get the good news out of the way first. Madcap's ring gear is 1,000 times better than whatever in the hell he was wearing at that Backlash show. And that's about where the good news stops. Of course, it's a no DQ match, so the only thing people give a fuck about are tables, because wrestling fans are stupid. And they did stuff. Corbin spent most of the match fucking with the fans who kept chanting for tables by pulling out chairs from under the ring. That was kind of funny. But Corbin is as boring now as he was when I watched him in developmental like 5 or 6 years ago. The only difference now is he finally did something about the receding hairline. And Madcap Moss, the guy's got a good look, but I have no reason to believe they'll ever do anything with him. And that guy has mid-Carter for life painted all over him, and honestly, the guy doesn't blow me away to make me think otherwise. The finish was well done, I'll give him that. Moss driving the steps into the lid of the chair, which was wrapped around Corbin's neck, that looked cool. If that angle were done 30 plus years ago, it would have been a 6-month injury angle to write the guy off of TV, or just an angle to write the guy out of the company, period. But it's modern wrestling, so I would expect Corbin to be back on television by next week. But once again, it was a TV match that did not belong on one of these premium live event shows. That's all I really have to say about it. Up next was Don't Call Him Austin Theory versus Mustafa Ali for the United States Championship. And it's Ali's hometown here in Chicago. So you know who's doing the job, right? Trust me, I've watched WWE for years. I know how this works. Fine match, though. I've seen better Austin Theory matches before, but God, that kid's such a wrestling prodigy. Even a slightly off Theory match is better than most of what the younger talent have to offer in the business today. Not named MJF, of course. Hey, he's just another one of those guys that really knows how to pay good attention to the subtleties. He's got the facials down packed. He just oozes that douchebag heel charisma to a T. Mid-card belts in WWE don't really mean jack shit to begin with, but at least he has one. Shows Vince is still on board with them, and hopefully they make more out of him in the next few years because they've got something with that kid. If he stays healthy and doesn't do anything stupid or reckless, yeah, he's going to be a big star for them. Like I said, there was some clunkiness at points here. Theory did that leaping Spanish fly where he basically goes airborne, flips himself off the top rope, and then hits the guy with the move from the turnbuckle. I've seen him do that with fluidity plenty of times before. This time, he almost didn't clear it and came really close to spiking himself on his head. So that was scary. Haven't talked much about Ali. He was just kind of there for the ride, you know? The minimal stuff I've seen of Ali in WWE, I remember he was at the head of some real major controversy when he was trying to get out of his contract, but the company wouldn't let him go. So, of course, he's back, and y'all know they were going to bury him into the core of the earth. But, like, I don't know. I guess there's an appeal there for the Middle Eastern fan base, but for me, he's kind of just a guy that does moves. And I see 14,000 of those every week on the other channel, and some of those guys are actually more impressive than anything I saw Ali do in this match. Maybe it was just the wrong first impression for an Ali match, but, I mean, Theory was clearly the standout in this match, no question. But at long last, the only thing that mattered on this show, the main event. The first Hell in a Cell match on the Hell in a Cell Premium Live event. Because it makes all the sense in the world. After all, you know, you're going to name the show Hell in a Cell. You may as well only have one Hell in a Cell gimmick match booked for the card. Makes sense to me. Anyway, it's Dusty Rollins in polka dots versus Cody Rhodes. Dude, Seth is... I don't even know what the fuck Seth is doing at this point. It's hilariously awful, but I can't tell if I'm supposed to feel that way about it. I've seen people describe his dancing routine as him freaking. Like, what is Seth doing during his ring entrance? Oh, he's just freaking. Oh, is that right? Well, it's freaking something. The polka dot gear was amusing, and Cody sold it perfectly when he saw it. Just looking at him like, what in the hell are you doing? So I already kind of covered the Cody story at the top of the report, but if the giant pectoral bruise didn't already paint the picture of Cody's condition here, I don't know what else will. And as noted, they had a legitimate excuse to shorten the match length and get in and get out as quickly and effectively as possible. And then they proceeded to just say, fuck it, let's go out there and have the best match of 2022 so far. And of course, with the right side of Cody being the focal target here, that was basically the entire story of the match. And whereas in most wrestling matches these days, nobody knows how to work an injury angle, well, now the people have a shoot injury angle match to watch, take notes on, and learn how to apply to their matches. So, maybe this was intentional on Cody's part. Maybe he's like, tired of all these young kids not knowing how to do an injury angle or work a body part in matches. So, let me just hurt myself on purpose so that the young kids know what to do. But they really milked and built up the gravity of that injury throughout. You know, Seth was going for that body part throughout the whole match. Cody was visibly struggling and pushing himself to work that right side. You could tell that even on death's door, he's trying to muster up all that strength to do anything. God. Now, of course, as soon as Seth broke out the table from under the ring, it got the biggest pop of the entire show. Fans chanting, "Thank you, Seth." Because that's all the people care about anymore in these kinds of matches with weapons. It's tables, tables, and more tables. I guess we have TLC to thank for that one. But Seth ended up taking a great frog splash bump through it. I have never seen someone get so much height off a top rope splash like Seth does. That guy's fucking unreal. So then, all of a sudden, in the middle of this Hell in a Cell match, Cody and Seth randomly decide that they're going to have a Texas bull rope match. Cody goes under the ring and pulls out a bull rope, and it's got the whole cowbell gimmick and everything. Guess we're just meant to assume that Cody had placed this there before the show started. Kind of like how Seth had planted a polka dot weight belt under the ring that he used at one point. Again, it's wrestling. Just go with it. I did kind of pop when Cody clunked Seth with the cowbell. Like, you could hear that clear as day smack off his cranium. And they're going at it for a while longer. Seth ended up breaking out the sledgehammer, which is always fantastic when it's a Cody match. Would have been better if Seth had pulled out a golden shovel. And the hammer ended up coming into play toward the finish. I was surprised Cody broke out the pedigree for this match. I really thought they were going to have him save that for when he won the championship, or when he ends up winning the championship. Unfortunately, it was just a near fall, and I was kind of hoping it would have been the finish. Would have been apropos. But fast forward to the end, they do some more reversals on each other. Cody hit a series of crossroads on Seth. They both do the crawl for the hammer. Cody snatches it. He initially drops it so he can hit Seth with 2 more crossroads. And then he finally picks up the hammer, clocks it off of Seth's head, and gets the big climactic pin. I know there was a lot of drama going into this match because there were legitimately a handful of people that thought that they were going to have Seth get his win back in this match when, frankly, it was never really called for in the context of the story. But no, they didn't do that. They went with the whole Hunter Batista story with this. The 3 consecutive babyface wins, capping it off inside the cell. I really enjoyed this match. One of the best main events I've seen on a WWE show in Lord knows how long. And now, well, Cody's basically out of action for the remainder of the year, and Seth has to recover after 3 consecutive pay-per-view losses to the guy. God, poor Seth. Again, the timing of the Cody injury could not have been any worse. I really feel bad for the guy, and, imagine that. It's a stupid injury that had nothing to do with actual wrestling. Just a freak accident in the weight room. Which now is making me even more cautious when I'm lifting weights at the gym. Now I'm like double checking my posture with everything and making sure I'm not about to tear one of my pecs. But, this is absolutely a critical match that every wrestling fan and, quite frankly, every talent needs to watch, no matter what company you're working for. This is how you do real drama in pro wrestling. These are the classic old stories that still make the business great. And, even if you have your qualms about the particulars of the match, I could probably name drop a few if you give me a minute here. It's not important with everything that surrounded this match. Cody earned my respect for this night. Seth has been great in this entire series, despite the weirdness with everything surrounding his gimmick. And this is probably one of the better booked feuds WWE's done in a long time. From top to bottom with the story, the matches, the finishes, the segments, the whole gamut. These guys have been phenomenal in this program. I wish Cody a speedy recovery, and hopefully he comes back healed and on the same level he's been in the last few months here with WWE. The main event alone automatically makes this show a must-watch for wrestling fans. Even if you're a die-hard WWE hater or you hate Cody's matches, period, believe me, I've had my issues with Cody in the last couple years, but even I am willing to acknowledge when he does something great. Aside from the main event, I'd probably encourage you to go watch the opening 3-way. Again, even if you're not the biggest fan of women's wrestling, I'm highly critical of a lot of it, especially in today's business. But that was an actual good women's match, and I legitimately mean that. The stuff in the middle, you could probably take or leave if I'm being honest. The 6-man was a lot of fun, although I wouldn't say it's something you necessarily need to go out of your way to watch. But overall, this was miles more tolerable than that AEW pay-per-view from last week, which was just long, treacherous, and never-ending. And there was nothing on that show at quality level that I saw from this show, especially that main event. But wrapping up things here. Thanks for stopping into this installment of the 5 Starr Wrestling Report. We will be back this coming Friday for the continuation of the Retro Review series and possibly our first Dynamite in a while without the involvement of either CM Punk or MJF in any capacity. So that one's going to be a straw grasper in terms of finding good material. Especially when I know Jon Moxley's working the main event. Oh, God. Buckle up for that one, folks. That one's going to be a bumpy one. Until then, take care all. Peace out.